Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I am Richard Dugan, your host, and this particular conversation is the first conversation that we are going to have in the new year. That's right, and it's 2025, and we are talking with a gentleman who has written his own book, and in a manner of speaking, it's referencing his father, as I often reference my late father. The book is entitled It's About Time, Millions of Copies Sold for Dad. Mark Connor, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I'm looking forward to this conversation that you have sort of set in motion because of the writing of this book.
Well, thank you, Richard. I really appreciate being here, and Happy New Year. I hope everything goes well for you this year, and I'm really excited for the conversation.
Me too. I'm looking forward to some wonderful success, abundance, and prosperity, all those good things that we always look forward to at the front end of a new year. I came to the realization, however, Mark, that the this whole aspect of a new year takes place more than once in a 12-month calendar year, because you will have shortly Chinese New Year. You have the Jewish New Year, I think, which is in the fall. And there are a couple of others that are recognized elsewhere in the world. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is a good place to start, right after the solstice, the winter solstice, the transition from fall to winter, halfway through, so to speak. So we get maybe 2 or 3 or however many more opportunities to sort of, some people will do resolutions, right? Have you ever done that?
I have, yeah.
And how has that worked out for you?
Well, it's not. I mean, I'd say that there are plenty of times when I haven't actually accomplished whatever the goal was, but at least with this book, which I completed in 2021, as I came to the end of Uh, as I came to the end of the year, leading towards Christmas in December of 2020, and all the crazy stuff that happened in 2020, starting with my father having died at September 30th of 2019 and mourning through that, I had said to myself, I'm going to do something early in the year that of 2021 that I know my father would be happy with, and that is I'm going to complete this book. So at least I did that. It took me another 3 years to actually get it into print, but one step at a time for everything. I mean, right now I'm thinking to myself, oh no, I only have 52 weeks left in the whole year. So
Yeah, exactly. It's like countdown. And I have to tell you that I wish that my father had lived long enough to read my book. I only published it this past September, but he passed away back in on March 1st of 2023. And there are times when I wish I could pick up the old phone and call and talk with him and hear his voice. I don't know about you. I had the good fortune to interview both my interview, which is kind of cool. And obviously, I quote my dad quite often.
Yeah.
And oh well, my dad, he does not like to be referred to as a wise guy, for starters. But he did have some rather wise sayings, and that was kind of cool. Now, this is interesting, Mark. You are you're a boxing trainer as
I am.
well as a writer. How did you get involved in boxing and primarily as a trainer? I would assume that, you used to box yourself.
Yeah, so I had 102 amateur fights, and I started boxing when I was 10 years old. I got very interested in it, and I begged my father to take me to a gym. Um, Real quickly, so my when the movie Rocky came out,
Mm.
I remember so I was I'm probably 8 years old at the time. My brother was saying we got to see that movie. It's gonna be a great movie, and I thought it looked stupid, and we didn't see it. My family always went to a lot of movies, and we ended up going to the movie Rocky 2. And I always thought I really started thinking about being a boxer around that time. And there was the amateur boxing was really popular on TV. The USA team was on TV every weekend, and there was always professional fights on free TV. And so I was really getting interested in it at that time. And I remember saying to my mother, well, the one thing about the movie Rocky 2 is in the series, that story, he won and became world champion. Rocky Balboa did in that
Hmm.
movie. And in the first one, he lost. And I was thinking to myself, I might not have been inspired if I saw him lose the first time to actually be a boxer. I always wondered how that would have influenced me. But I remember telling my mother, I just thinking, I think I'd like to be a boxer. And she told me, no, there's no way you're going to be a boxer. I said, why not? She said, because you can, if you box, you can get your nose broken. I said, if someone breaks my nose, I'll break his nose. And she said to me, see, that's just the attitude boxing gives you. But I just kept begging my dad, begging him and begging him. Finally, he said, I know someone that might be able to, introduce you to the coach. And when I went to the gym, I quit everything else at that time. I still ended up playing baseball in the summer, but I quit hockey, and I'd had one football game that I'd played. I just started, it was fifth grade, 10 years old. I just started playing football, and uh, the coach had been upset that guys weren't showing up to practice. And a Friday night when my dad took me to this boxing card where I was able to meet the coach that trained me, um, I said I got to go to football practice first because I was always really obedient and always like on time to everything, and really respected authority, and was kind of that kind of a kid, and I didn't want to get into trouble. And he said, no, you don't have time to do football today and go to find out about boxing. You got to do one or the other. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm gonna be off the team. I said, okay. And the coach probably would have let me go back on the team, but I was so interested in boxing, I just started boxing right away. And it was kind of my way of playing after school. Was I look at kids who wanted to ride their bike and or go throw a football around or something, but I was down at the boxing gym, and when I was hitting the bag or whatever I was doing, I was imagining myself being one of the professional fighters I watched on TV. So.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, you
So
were,
that's
go
how I
ahead.
got into coaching.
Mhm.
After I stopped boxing competitively in 1994, that spring, I was one fight away from getting back to the National Golden Gloves. I wanted to at least win a national title I before I quit, because I had a degree in English at that time, BA in English, and had decided I wanted to also be a writer, and it kind of the two kind of pulled at each other because it's hard to blend them both together. But um, I also had some Achilles tendons issues and stuff, and so I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to fight professionally. I'm going to have to go do something adventurous now and go on a Jack Kerouac adventure. So I drove out to Seattle and stayed with a friend of a friend and walked boat to boat on the docks in Elliott Bay and so forth, looking for a fishing boat job. I got a job on a fishing boat and went up to Alaska for that summer and
Mm.
just started kind of started my life as kind of a writer at that time. When I came back that fall, winter, I went right back to the gym though, and I was always contemplating fighting again, and I was still working out with guys, training with professionals. My teammate, Will Grigsby was his name, ended up becoming a junior flyweight champion of the world. I was his main sparring partner until he was ranked in the top 10. And then I started working with amateurs at that time. And then my last trainer, Dennis Presley is his name, God rest his soul. I've got th three of the four main guys that were my coaches throughout my years are dead now. The oldest one is named Jay Pelzer. He's still alive, going to turn 94, thank God. But anyway, Dennis Presley. Um, he had me assist him with some fighters. I've worked with some professionals on that level, but mostly what I do is a personal training service. So my business is called Fighting Chance Boxing for Life, and most people I train are, the white collar types that will pay you some money uh, to learn self-defense and get in shape and everything. And I do work with competitive amateurs right now. I haven't worked with a professional for a while. So,
Well, you and I share a lot of commonalities. I mean, obviously, we've already stated that our fathers have passed. I know that your mother passed as well, and I've lost an elder sister, my oldest sister, a year prior to my father. And I think that's the reason why he passed a year later because it was
well,
his eldest daughter, his eldest child, and I bring this story up quite regularly. My mother was sharing with me that my dad basically said, I'm tired. I just don't want to be here anymore. Now, he was not suicidal or anything. He just, he was 91. And she, knowing his good health, said to him in response to that, okay, so what are you going to die of? And of course, it wasn't long after that he was diagnosed with onset Parkinson's and early onset dementia. And I think, knowing my father, fortunately, 5 days later, he left. He died,
wow.
and it was really kind of surreal because I'm 64. I'll be 65 this year, and I know people my age and even older. My boss, for example, he had one year where people were dropping off left and right. Um, One of the other things that we share, of course, is our Catholic upbringing, as well as our Irish heritage. Unfortunately, when I checked with Ancestry.com, I'm not quite as much Irish as I had hoped, but I'll take what I can get. Have you been to Ireland?
Yeah, well, I just got back from I was just there between the 7th and the 16th of December.
Oh, wow.
Um I was I've got a friend so that oldest coach, oldest living coach. Actually, the oldest coach was my original coach,
Hmm.
Emmett Yanez, who died in God rest his soul in 2016. I mean, yeah, in 2016, he was to the day 3 months away from his 97th birthday. A World War II hero he was, and another World War II veteran, Jay Pelzer, who's 93 right now. His son Dave learned the welding trade from Jay and is also an artist and does lot of is artistic welding. He married a woman who is from Galway, family's from Galway, and they've been actually living in a place called Clonbar, Galway, a couple of towns outside of Galway City, for since 2004. They raised 9 kids out there, and
Mm,
uh, anyway, so he's just a little bit older than you. I think he's 66 now. He's the
mm,
eldest son of Jay, and I
wow.
was visiting him and his wife, and I went between Galway and uh, Mayo. I went to Westport, and I didn't climb Patrick this time. I went there just up a little ways. I didn't realize that the weather was good enough. People were actually climbing it at this time of year, but it takes 3.5 hours to get up there. And I was going to get back to Columba in the rental car. I didn't want to drive on the left side of the road in the rental car in the dark alone because it's the first time I've driven in Ireland, and I was there in 1996 for a month, and I was there in 1998 for 6 months. When I
Mm.
was there in 1996, I met a girl from Ohio. I wish I could remember her name. It was a really beautiful Irish American girl who was staying in the same hostel I was in Dublin, and she told me about having just turned down a volunteer stipend to work in a homeless shelter in Dublin. And later in the next year, I had called her and she sent me the information, and I applied in 1997. And from 1998, I was able to be in Ireland from late January to late July. And I wrote a lot about that. I talk a little bit about that, not a lot, but a little bit about that in the book because um, there was kind of a cultural revival going on in during the Troubles in the United States, and especially in St. Paul, which has my hometown, which has uh, a kind of an Irish identity to it and history to it. And I had met actually people. Uh, there was a program called the Irish Political Prisoners Children's Holiday Program. I'd met four of the chaperones who'd come over here during the 90s that would come over here with children who during and people who don't know Irish politics aren't going to know what this big issue was, but during the summertime when the Orange Order marches were happening, it was a really violent time, and these were kids who had a parent or a relative that was either killed or in prison because of the conflict. Um, Families around the country would open their homes to give the kids a break during the violent summers for about 4 to 6 weeks. And in St. Paul, I knew the lady who coordinated it. I actually wrote some articles about it, and so I had places to stay in Belfast and in Derry for free. People put me up, and then I also had friends in Dublin and a couple other places. So I didn't have to spend a lot on accommodation when I was there, and I wrote a lot about that. And I was there when the treaty happened and all that kind of stuff. So I was there when kind of checking out the situation.
Mm.
Um, but I will admit to you too that I'm not, I mean my family's been here for 6 generations, the Connor side. So I'm not you don't stay in another country that long. An immigrant doesn't come to the country and then have generations after like in the United States and all be the same ethnic background. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Connor disguises, some German in me and stuff like that.
Well, I did not know that I was 1% Eastern European Jew, although I had a pretty good idea that I had a connection to the Native American tribes up and down the American continent, North, Central, and South American, which I thought was really interesting considering my aversion to stepping into that realm because I felt I needed to be respectful of the privacy, so to speak, of that particular heritage. And then when I found out, oh, I'm actually one of them, so I'm okay. I felt better about that. I will also say too, my wife and we were back in Ireland around this time in 2002, 2003, from Christmas Eve to I think it was I want to say January 2nd or 3rd. So we were there over Christmas and New Year's. in that year. And then we went back in late January of 2004 for her birthday on February 2nd. And I was speaking with a gentleman from Northern Ireland at the radio station some years later. Excuse me. And I said, I just love the country. I mean, I want to live there. I want to move there. And he says, okay, I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you, what is it about Ireland that you love the most? And without missing a beat, I said, the people. There's
Yeah.
just something about the people in that country, on that island. It is an island, ladies and gentlemen. That I mean, just their warmth. But I could sit in a pub with a glass of Guinness silently, which is unusual for me, and just listen to the people talk. I'm not eavesdropping on conversations.
Yeah.
Just love listening to that beautiful Irish, I'll call it accent or lilt, what have you. I don't know what it is about that, but it's mesmerizing for me anyway. But you also have, with your book, It's About Time, you have won an award in 2024 through the Irish Network Minnesota Bloomsday Literary Award. That's the award through a publishing company whose area we actually stayed in for about a week, the Connemara Patch Press. First of all, congratulations on that, and the work that you are doing. And we're going to get into a little bit more of the book too. But how did that? Is this your first work? Is this your first authorship? And whether it is or not, how did that feel to win anything at all, to be recognized in that regard?
That felt really good, and I thought I was confident entering my work into that competition, but I was also, I mean, I had absolutely no idea that I was going to win it. Now, I I actually, I mean, everyone who went, pretty much everyone who entered, it's a small enough community that we all know and are on friendly terms with the people that run Irish Network Minnesota, right? But the judge, Tim Nolan, who's a nationally recognized poet, he's a lawyer in Minneapolis who had when he was going to graduate school in Columbia, he was his first job was reading the pile for poetry at the Paris Review, and he's got a bunch of national recognition. He was the judge. He was the impartial judge, and it was really flattering to me because the representative from Irish Network Minnesota told me, okay, so he's going to make a statement when you're presented. He wanted to say why he wanted to say why he chose this work. When he and I was told that usually they've been doing it for about 4 years, but they've never had one of their judges actually get up and make a speech about uh, why this work was chosen, and so that was pretty flattering. And the really cool thing, he actually said that he thought it was a Joycean work, and Bloomsday is, for those who don't know, is Bloomsday is June 16, 1905, and that's the day that Leopold Bloom, that the main character in Ulysses by James Joyce, that's the day that the story of the novel actually takes place in Dublin. And you know, people who are enthusiasts of Irish culture do extraordinary things to celebrate it. And one thing that is done about this, celebrating this novel, is people celebrate that day throughout the world. There are celebrations, and there's people who, celebrate it in Dublin and everything. And so that's the origins of that award. Um, and I was very flattered when you said, well, it's kind of a Joycean work, but um, and I have not read a lot of Joyce. The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is the main work of his that I've read. But um, he was talking about the different styles of writing that are in the book. So I refer to it as, and it says on the back jacket that it's a saga wrapped around a package of poems guarded by angels.
Mm.
And it's got 20 poems running through it. It's 19 actual set as poems, and one at the end of I believe it's chapter one. Yeah, it breaks into a poem at the end. So I count it as 20 poems. So they're interwoven with a lot of prose. So it's a autobiography reading like a novel, and then it's got these poems running through it, and it's got the theme of guardian angels running through it also. Uh, which I kind of mentioned in the first page, when I describe how I heard that my father had had a heart attack and that the guardian angels were watching over my mom and dad when it happened, because he was kept alive for 10 days, although he was on life support. And my my brother was so at some point I'd like to maybe read some excerpts,
I
but
would love that. I would love that.
well, I'll just start out the first paragraph then.
Sure.
Um, I came up with the title of this book on September 30, 2019, the day my father died. Dad had been on life support since September 20, when he had a heart attack in a rental car in a Costco parking lot in San Francisco, California, 5 minutes from the airport, to which he and mom were about to drive to catch a plane home. I was supposed to pick them up at the Twin Cities International Airport. Mom had called me just after 3 p.m. as I bought a sandwich at the Jimmy John's on Grand Avenue in St. Paul. Mom and Dad had been sitting in that rental car discussing their great 4-day vacation, staying at the Marines Memorial Club in San Francisco. They were talking about how much they loved each other, how much they loved their two sons and their daughter-in-law, Kelly, my brother David's wife, and their two grandchildren, Liam, 15, and Caroline, 13. They were talking about how lucky they were and how great a marriage they'd had for over 51 years and how they couldn't wait to get back home to the blessings of their family, friends, and life. Dad began pulling out of the parking spot and was struck with a heart attack, slumping over the wheel. Mom put the car in park and jumped out, yelling for help. Their guardian angels were watching over them.
Mm.
This is how their guardian angels were watching over them. There was a health fair going on at the Costco. Two EMTs responded, one of them utilizing a defibrillator, keeping Dad alive. 10 days later, shortly after 1 p.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m., the hour of divine mercy, in our hometown of St. Paul, I led Mom in the Rosary, the Litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the canonization prayer for Blessed Solanus Casey, and the Chaplet of Divine Mercy over Dad in his hospital bed. Um, I'll go on. Well, I'll explain more about that. But
Sure.
if I go on with it, it's going to be a while. There are a lot of more details just in the next few sentences in that paragraph. But the stuff about, like, he praying the rosary over him, and then uh the 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 canonization prayer of Blessed Solanus Casey and stuff like that, that has to do with that specific prayer, had to do with that specific rosary that I had and everything. All that stuff gets um gets mentioned again, in the end of the book, all because so it kind of balances itself out.
Right.
That's kind of how I structure the story. Um, but interesting also. Uh, I'm talking about my life. It's an autobiography. So I'm talking about these experiences I had. I talk about boxing. I talk about um, different relationships I've had in life, and the poems deal with that. Um, but um, excuse me. Um, so I talk a lot about my Catholic faith in this book. I also talk about the time I spent in the Native American Indian community. And
Mm.
we're mentioning, like you're mentioning, the Guinness in Ireland. And this trip is the first time I actually had a Guinness in Ireland. The first two times I was there in 1996 and 1998, I actually wasn't drinking because in 1995, a poet who I mentioned in here, I refer to him as uh, this great award-winning uh, uh, Mississippi River barge hand poet, which is what he was. He worked for years on the barges of the Mississippi River, named Kevin O'Rourke. He was in his early 40s when I met him. I was in my early 20s. In 1992, I met him. In 1995, the year after I'd been on that fishing boat, instead of going back and working in the fishing industry, which economically speaking would have probably been better for me if I'd done that. And I
Mhm.
kind of wish I'd have learned that trade a little more. Um, I had been interested. He told me the night I met him that he had been sober for all these years, and he got his sobriety. Part of it was by spending time with the Lakota people in South Dakota, and he'd gone down to these sun dances. And he took me to this Sundance ceremony in Rosebud. I went there 3 years, 95, 96, 97. And then the following summer, I had met this Canadian Ojibwe from Red Lake, Ontario. And the cover of the book is actually painted by him.
Mhm.
His name's Eric Keast. He's this incredible, incredible artist, and he was working at a Native American homeless shelter for kids called Anda Young. AIN is the first word, on, and DAH is the second word, and Young, YUNG, which means our home. And it's in the middle of St. Paul, and I got a job working there. In 1999 through 2003, Darwin Strong, Gabby Strong was the executive director when I was working there in my 20s, and her husband, Darwin Strong, took a real liking to me, and he is actually a helper. He's what would be called a Sundance helper in Sundance in Kyle, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So 4 years in a row, I went with those guys down there, and they uh, uh, this, so the one real serious value of what walking the red road, as it's called, of being involved in that spirituality, is sobriety, and so I I didn't. I was never an alcoholic, but I didn't drink at all when I was in that community, and I worked for 13 and a half years at Anda Young.
Mm.
Um, so I bring that up because you're talking about uh, connection to the Native American history and everything, in finding that out in your background, and it was something that kind of worked into this story because uh, there's a real affinity that the Irish have with American Indians, and having gone through the whole colonization relationship and everything, that whole process.
Mm.
So I think I'm getting a little tangential at this point, but
No worries, no worries at all. Because that's what this program is about. Listening to your story, and you come across to me, and I want to talk about this as we continue here in a minute. But you come across to me as not only a proud Irishman, a proud Catholic, author, etc. And we're going to dive into a lot of those different areas as we continue here with Mark Connor. The title of the book is "It's About Time." Millions of copies sold for Dad, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and this is a program that is designed to give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Here's a gentleman who has been through quite a bit of adversity in, you might say, the last 10 years or so, and at the same time has also experienced some great highs, especially with his book, which is entitled It's About Time, millions of copies sold for Dad. And One of the things, you talked about, the rosary. When I was working in Phoenix for a Christian station, I produced a program called, and I've always found these titles interesting, but this particular program, which was only a half hour long, 5 days a week, was called the Radio Family Rosary Hour. It's a half hour, and it was called the hour. Anyway, but I would produce these individual programs up where they would go into the various churches in Phoenix and they would record the parishioners reciting the different rosaries, the joyful, the glorious, the sorrowful, and so
Mhm.
forth. And then they would have a little. You could call it a homily. It was a little a story, if you will, at the end of the rosary, and I used to hear criticisms from many of the non-Catholics. They were Christians, but they didn't understand. Why are you praying to Mary? And I said, no, you don't understand. Apparently, you don't understand the concept of intercessory prayer. You go to your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your family, your fellow parishioners, asking them to pray for you, to intercede, if you will. It's no different than the rosary praying to Mary or Joseph or whoever it is that you choose to pray. You're asking them because you believe they're still alive, if you will, in the spirit, to intercede. And so that's all it is. And so that, and I even remember when the Pope came to Phoenix, and my wife at that time, my first wife, we bicycled. That's how we got around on a bicycle. We had a tandem, a bicycle built for two. She was totally blind, but anyway, we
Okay.
drove down to the central Phoenix, and we found our space up on top of the plaza area, above what is called the Civic Plaza there in Phoenix, where we could actually see the balcony of the basilica. And when he came out to speak to the people and wave and all of this, and then I managed to, I don't even know where I got this rosary from that period of time, which I still have.
Mhm.
But that's an aspect of one of the things for me in my Catholicism is that I I enjoy the ritual, the traditions, and the ceremony. My first wife actually introduced me to, through her family, the Eastern Rite or the
Yeah,
Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church. I have a hardcover copy of the liturgy, which is the same every week, with the exception, of course, of the sermon or homily and some of the readings. And they do it in Slavonic.
okay.
To that end, as a proud Irishman, do you speak Gaelic? And have you ever attended a service where they did that, say in Ireland when you were there, where they did the service in Gaelic as opposed to say English or obviously prior to the 60s in Latin, which I know
So
you were around for.
I speak a little. I mean, I've learned
Hmm.
some Irish. I don't. I'm certainly nowhere near fluency. I can say hello and a couple of things. I can um I can catch a few words,
Hmm.
but I took Spanish in college, so much easier could speak Spanish. Um,
I know the
but
feeling.
yeah, but no, I have learned some of it, and uh no like Shona do it is Merry Christmas, and different phrases and stuff like that. But no, I don't actually speak it,
Hmm.
but I know some of it,
Yeah.
and I find it to be a really beautiful language, and I really love to hear it spoken.
Yeah. My wife and I actually took an online course. Actually, it was just recordings that I downloaded. And the course was actually entitled Get the Bit, or just a bit, or a little bit, learning
Yeah,
it as a time. And a phrase that anytime we separate, go our separate ways, or I leave for work, or what have you, or on a phone call when we're wrapping it up, obviously I tell her I love her. And then slangafal, which is goodbye
wonderful.
until later,
Yeah,
or I'll
yeah,
see you
yeah,
later.
yeah.
We have a stained glass framed a piece that hangs on a wall that says falcha, or welcome.
Right, right, right.
The thing about Gaelic is that, as opposed to Spanish, there are words in Spanish that I took a whole semester in high school that actually do sound a little bit like the English versions,
Yeah.
but there is nothing in Gaelic that sounds anything like the English versions, and probably because Gaelic has been around a lot longer than
Right, right.
English. So it
Well,
wasn't an outgrowth.
yeah, there's uh California based he died I believe uh, professor named Cassidy who wrote a book called How the Irish Invented Slang, and it's about American slang and how there are all of these words in the American English language that are just Irish words that are phonetically spelled in English,
Hmm.
and that it was a lot of mixing with African Americans in different urban areas w with Irish immigrants. It was from African American culture, but from also from jazz, baseball culture, and poker culture that a lot of the slang comes from. And so, like, if you think, like like you said, Slan Felsh or Slanawaya, you say Slanawaya, Waya means home. It's like safe home.
Hmm.
Slan means health, SLAN. Um, and then they would be shortened to Slan, and that's where so long comes from.
Ah,
Like you just
interesting.
say real fast, slong, slong, slong. Right? It sounds kind of the same.
Right.
You
My
know,
under Yeah,
there are a
and my
couple of things,
understand
couple things
yeah,
like
my
that.
understanding too is that the dancing that they did with their arms down by their sides, the river dance as they call it, um, originally in history, it was the method used by the Irish to communicate and get messages to the rest of the people without the British or any other invaders um, knowing what they were talking about. And by the way, speaking of which, I find it interesting what I know of Irish history. All of the various, I'll call them invaders of
Yeah.
Ireland, with the exception of the British and Northern Ireland, never succeeded in taking over the Irish people or the country at large. And you would think that if they would look back through it's kind of like our mistakes going into Afghanistan following the Russians. They failed, and so did we. So leave the Irish alone. They're going to beat you at every turn. That's kind of my view of the Irish in Ireland down through history is they always found a way. The angels, the Celtic tradition, if you will, the Druids, whoever you want to draw upon, they had spirit on their side, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's but yeah, but it's they've never quite gotten it all the way, but
No,
they've come close, they've come close.
yeah.
So
But
yeah.
that's one of the things too that I love about the country. When we were there, we stayed in a small heritage village called Lismore down in County Waterford. We were there for a
Okay.
week, stayed in a bed and breakfast. We'd walk all over the place, and then of course take a drive down to. Now I used to call this southern coastal city or town or village Y'all. I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly. But nonetheless, we loved driving to different places. My wife drove the entire time. And she said that the way she was able to do it, she just reminded herself, stay to the center. Just stay to the center and you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Although I do remember our first experience with a roundabout leaving Dublin International Airport. I think we went around about 5 or 6 times till we figured out the exit that we needed. So that's the beauty of roundabouts. You don't have to get out right away.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
go around a few times. But there are things about that country and its heritage that are so beautiful. Have you ever been to Newgrange, that ancient site, the prehistoric site?
I haven't. I have to say I haven't. No.
It's a beautiful place. We would love to be there, of course, at winter solstice because at sunrise, the sun comes pouring through the opening all the way to the back. When we were there, and as a guy involved in sound, we get down inside the chamber, which is not an easy thing to do. But we went down inside there, and the acoustics inside that chamber, I can't describe them any less than they were like perfect. It
I've
wasn't a
heard.
dead sound, but it wasn't hollow, in spite of all of the rocks, the solid walls around
Mhm.
us. It was incredible. And they did not used to allow you to take photographs or any kind of recording devices inside. However, they must have changed the rules because now there are pictures and videos online of the interior of Newgrange. But Ireland has a very rich heritage that people should learn about, along with other parts of the world. Do you
Mm.
think that you have a fairly well-rounded understanding of so to speak, global history from different parts of the world? Because I got to tell you, growing up in school, we just touched a little bit here and a little bit there because obviously the world is so big and there are so many different countries and so many different cultures. But it seems to me like that's what would really draw us together if we understood more about each other and where we come from.
Well, it probably would. I think I've got a decent understanding, more than a lot, but I'd say that I could definitely learn a lot more,
Yeah.
you know, for sure.
Mark Connor is my guest. He's a boxing trainer, but he's also a writer. He's an author of It's About Time. Millions of copies sold for Dad. The website will be linked to his boxers and writersmagazine.com. That's boxers and writersmagazine.com. We hope that you will go to that website, find out more about Mark Connor as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I am fascinated by this conversation with Mark Connor, my very special guest, a boxing trainer. There is a line in your book in that I guess you would refer to it as that first poem, "The Perfect Metaphor." I'm guessing this date has to do with when it was written, Monday, August 21st, 2017. That starts out the perfect metaphor to describe boxing is jazz. There is a rhythm to every fight. And what I think really is really interesting about that is that even if blows aren't struck, if you are in a verbal tussle or fight, if you will, maybe a debate and so forth, that even in those instances, whatever the conflict is, there is a rhythm to that. And if you can get into that rhythm, I don't know if it's necessarily grounds for success, but that maybe what's the how does the metaphor work for the boxer in terms of winning and losing, or maybe just coming to a draw?
Well, a number of things. First, just to answer that really quickly, the boxer who controls the rhythm of the fight is the one who wins the fight. That's pretty much the way it is. You've got to, if you can control the rhythm of the fight, then you're going to win the fight. Um, I and to apply that to the rest of life and to apply it to specifically to jazz, I remember watching, I believe it was in the early 90s, I was watching a documentary about Miles Davis, and Herbie Hancock was talking, and he was talking about conversation, like the conversation we're having right now, saying, hey, something to the effect of, because I can't quote it exactly, but something about how, how you're talking to someone, then something is said, and then you go on to another idea, and something triggers going this direction or that direction. That's there's kind of a rhythm going on in that conversation, and then the alteration to another direction is exemplary of the improvisation that's involved with jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And so speaking of that improvisation metaphor in terms of conversation, when you first were asking about the book, you asked if it was a first thing I've published. It's the first book that I've published. I published a lot of articles and stuff before that. I've had five poems published before, in articles and stuff like that. Never gotten any short stories or fiction published prior to this, but I've written a bunch of fiction. Um, and then as far as you're asking about the rhythm of the fight in boxing, there's always, if you think about it, there's a ritual. We were talking about ritual with prayer earlier, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a ritual to life. There's a routine you get in your life. When it comes to boxing, you learn to live ritualistically. You learn to get to bed at a certain time, get up in the morning, and you get once you get your feet on the ground, you get your stretched out and some exercise and get out and you do your running, and then you have your routine of the day, because you have to hone yourself into uh, a certain kind of condition so that you can fight. And so there's certain rhythm going to each workout that you do, the different apparatuses you're on and so forth to prepare for a fight. It works into the actual fight itself. I mean, the next lines after that, there's a rhythm to every fight. I say I learned this from Dennis Presley, who learned it from Rock White.
Mm.
Dennis Presley was that last trainer I talked about. His protege was Rock White, and Rock White had given me a he'd given me a cassette tape when I was boxing for them of Miles Davis album. The first side was just one piece called "Right Off," and the second side was a piece called uh, "Yesternow." And the title the of the album was a tribute to Jack Johnson, and it was in that experience of that, and then also talking to Dennis Presley, who was the last trainer I had, and what I really considered a genius in terms of strategy with boxing and developing boxers. Um, we just he, I just learned that this establishment of rhythm in a fight. And if you watch guys boxing, you can see where the momentum goes and who's able to land the punches, make the guy miss, because the ring generalship and then the control of the momentum of the fight, besides landing the actual punches, has a lot to do with who can wear the guy down, who can beat the guy, who can actually dominate. So,
Mm. Well, I myself I like to avoid getting into their eye, of course, just as brothers will be, is every once in a while, yeah, we get into a little tussle. This was, of course, when we were growing up, still living at home. Haven't had that situation. We don't think the same, but my God, why would you want to think the same as anybody? We have our own ideas, our own perspectives, and that's a wonderful thing. But speaking of siblings, do you have any siblings?
so I've got one brother who's 13 days less than 1 year older than I am. So they call that Irish twins. And
Okay.
yeah, I was mentioning him in the beginning of the beginning of the book. So he's senior. So we live in St. Paul, Minnesota. Like I say in the book, I consider myself the product of a mixed marriage because my dad grew up in St. Paul, my mom grew up in Minneapolis. Um, I was born in Minneapolis and raised in St. Paul. Um, so my brother, he's he's a senior public defender for Ramsey County, which is the county in which St. Paul, the capital of the state, is located. And his wife uh, was also a public defender, but she was appointed Ramsey County judge 4 years ago.
Mm.
So that's and then they've got a son who's now 20, Liam, and then a daughter 18, Caroline. And those are the two I first to Caroline, secondarily to Liam. Those are the two to whom I dedicate the book.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the publication company name, which was
Oh, Connemara
uh,
Patch Press.
just formed in the last year. It's is named after a neighborhood in St. Paul, which is not there anymore, but under the Third Street or Kellogg Bridge,
Hmm.
from the east side of St. Paul going to downtown St. Paul, between there and going north of there a little ways to East 7th Street. There's an area called it's actually called Bruce Vento Trail now. It's named after a deceased Congress member. Um, but it's kind of along by railroad tracks close to the Mississippi River. It's called. It was a neighborhood from the late 1800s. Was called Connemara Patch Press, and people from Connemara area, which is Galway,
Hmm.
Mayo of Ireland, settled there. And the really interesting thing about that, and what works into this book, is that Emmett Yanez, the first guy to teach me to box, um, and who was my trainer up to my senior year of high school. His first wife had a stroke. He had to take care of her till she died in 1993.
Mm.
So that's how I ended up going to different coaches. But um, he was from Mexican American family, born in Abilene, Texas, and when he turned 10 years old, his family, he's born in 1920, and in 1930 they moved to St. Paul, and Connemara Patch is right where they moved, and slowly it became not an Irish neighborhood but a Mexican neighborhood. And anyway, so that's something that's kind of synchronistic with my experience and everything I put into the book.
What I
So
also find interesting about the Irish history in this country, in the United States, specifically speaking of the Mexican-American War, and I hadn't thought about this until I was in a
uh,
production
San
in
Patricios.
yeah, exactly. But I hadn't even heard of this until I was in this production here in Santa Barbara. It was 2023, and it's a group called the Santa Barbara Rebels, and they put on this production where the scene was 1924, Ellis Island, Christmas Eve, and you had Germans and Irish and Mexican or Spanish, I guess it was more Spanish. And I'm trying to think there was one other, but anyway, and the gentleman who was conducting this, who worked for Ellis Island and the Census Bureau and so forth back then, he was telling all of the people there, I'm sorry, but all the quotas have been met up to this point. You're all going to be stuck here through Christmas Day. And that's where the stories start to come out. And he starts telling the story of the Mexican American War and how, and the way it was phrased was hilarious. When the Irish found out about who they were going to be fighting against and all of the other things that were going on, they switched sides and fought on the side of the Mexicans.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that kind of goes to show you that there is karma, even way back when, that back then, because obviously almost every nationality has been taken advantage of in this country and around the world too. It's not exclusively a U.S. problem. And these gentlemen in particular, they said, "No, we're not going to fight against these people. We love these people. These are our brothers and sisters and so forth." And I just thought that was an interesting look. And I get the sense that overall, down through history, that Irish, despite all of the challenges they've been through, really just a peace-loving people. They just leave us alone and let us live our lives,
Yeah.
and do the things that we do, worship the way we want to worship, Catholic, Protestant, Druid, if you will, Celtic, you
Yeah.
know. Matter of fact, that's a book. Matter of fact, the Book of Kells we were introduced to when we were in Lismore, and my understanding, I think, it is kept in. One of the churches there, I think in
No, the university,
yeah,
I'm trying to remember. It's I think it's Trinity University,
Trinity, yes, sir, Trinity
which is which
University,
is
Mark.
which
Yeah,
is not Catholic. It's Church of Ireland, so it's
right.
Anglican, and every day, so it's on display. And because I went in there and looked at it when I was living in Dublin, and it every day you go in there and they've turned the page. They have one page on display every day. That's a really really cool thing.
Oh, wow. So if
Yeah.
you can get there every day, take a snapshot, you could get, so to speak, a copy of it on your
Oh,
phone or
it's
whatever.
free, yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you know whether they've made copies available, printed up so people they could have a copy of it and read it?
I'm not aware of that. I would think
Yeah.
that there would be I would not be surprised if there's something like that though.
Yeah, you would think in this day and age, 21st century, that might be available. I'll have to look that up. And then, of course, it would probably need to be translated out of Gaelic. Um, Although this is a subject that's come up many times on this program, a lot of times when you start translating from one language to the next, you lose a lot of the context. I was studying Hebrew. I don't speak it or write it or anything, but I was studying the language, the alphabet, and each of the letters has its own legend, kind of like when you look at a map and you look in that lower corner and it tells you all of the symbols. Well,
Hmm.
each letter has its own color and its own tone, if you will, musical tone or vibration, has its own story. And you put those letters together with words and words, sentences, etc. But then when you translate it into another language, you lose all of that.
Hmm.
And I would think that Gaelic, though it may not, each of the letters in Gaelic may not have that kind of legend. It might. I don't know. I haven't studied it enough. That you're still going to lose something in translation. I mean, they're still saying today, I've heard this, for example, about the Bible and the Ten Commandments, specifically one, thou shalt not kill. Well, that's how I've always known it. That's how it's always been read in all of the versions of the Bible that I have here, from King James and all of the different ones. And now they're saying, oh, well, that word was mistranslated. It actually means thou shalt not murder. And I'm going, really? After nearly 1,500 years of scribing and then printing of the Bible, you are now telling us that you know better than all of these people down through history that that word is actually murder and not kill. And this is the point. The true meaning of the word is lost in translation. I would say
Hmm.
that the expansion of that would be, thou shalt not take another human life. That'd be a better way to phrase it because it's all encompassing.
Yeah.
But that would be very cool to get a copy of a Book of Kells. We're talking with Mark Connor. We're talking about his book. It's all about time, millions of copies sold for Dad, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I am talking with Mark Connor, and Mark, I want to talk about the cover of It's About Time. You showed us it a moment ago, and it's going to be up on the screen as people are going to be watching the video on YouTube. Um, but could you go through some of the symbolism? And now you mentioned the
Yeah.
artist's name. And
Yeah.
I'm curious as to whether the artist read the book, the manuscript, and then painted it, or that you made suggestions. This is what I'd like to see there. How did the artwork come about for the cover? And can you describe some of the symbols for us
Okay. Well,
and
in
their
the
meaning?
okay, when you open up the book under the acknowledgments, the first thing I say is special thanks to Dan Flynn, editorial advisor and cover concept. So Dan Flynn, the high school I went to was St. Thomas Academy, in the St. Paul area, and he had graduated from the academy the decade before me. Um, he was uh, he was assistant freshman football coach my freshman year there, and that's how I know him. And he's the author of uh, uh, famous Minnesotans, past and present. And he's also the older brother of guy who was um, my company commander in my freshman year at St. Thomas Academy, Vince Flynn, who was God rest his soul, he died a little over a decade ago, but he was a famous spy novelist from St. Paul. And anyway, I'm just getting a lot of detail, but Dan Flynn came up with the concept for me. And the idea I had as we talked about it was an hourglass, and then in the very middle would be very large, would be a medicine wheel, which is a Native American Indian medicine wheel, which is the circle with the four different colors, red, white, yellow, and black, that represent all the colors representing the people of the world. But um, I gave the concept to Eric Keast, so we're communicating by messenger and by somewhat by phone, because he's up in Canada, and which is over the border from Minnesota. But I remember now, I St. Paul is southeast, so it's closer to Wisconsin than it is to Canada. So anyway, uh, he is kind of a trippy guy. I like to describe his art as psychedelic surrealism. And
Mm-hmm.
so instead of making the medicine wheel big with each of the images small in each section, he made the medicine wheel small with the images a little larger. And so there's the shamrock in the northeast and the white section. The southeast is rosary with Celtic cross hanging off it. And then the left, in the black section, the southwest is a boxing glove, and then on the red section, in the northwest is an eagle's feather, which is a writer's quill. So it's Irish Catholic boxer writer. That's what it represents. And then if you look at the medicine wheel, you see, I mean, not the medicine wheel, but the uh, the large hourglass, you can see sand coming through it. And if you look, there are actually four hourglass in there. One is the big hourglass, and then in the upper right, you see where the imagery of the
Hmm.
sand falling into the hourglass and coming down. You can see the second from the right edge is there's an hourglass there.
Hmm.
If you look at the hill on the bottom of the hourglass with the sand coming down, and you see the painted desert kind of hills there. If you
Hmm.
look at it, if you realize horizontally, that's another hourglass inside the hourglass, horizontally from left to right, from the boxing glove to the right edge of the main hourglass. Um, if you look at the medicine wheel and then right up on top of the medicine wheel, you see kind of at the very top by where you get if you get you can follow the curve up around the left of the feather and get to the top of it, you can see in blue that there's a little darkness up there. That's the top of an hourglass there, and the medicine wheel is the bottom of the hourglass. So he has four hourglasses in there, and
Wow.
I think that I think that the concept of those if you see the like the blue kind of sections in the middle of the hourglass, it's that sand coming down. And I think that he almost had the concept, maybe that each sand pebble is in and of itself an hourglass. It's just, but I'm not sure if that was exactly what he was thinking with it, but something like that. So it just really blows me away. I figure judge a book by its cover, man. So, put it on the shelf, and I want you to buy it and read it and everything. But you know what? If you buy it just because of the cover and you never get around to reading it, you'll enjoy just staring at
Oh
that.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
He did a beautiful, beautiful job. I see the red cross there in the center, in front of the hourglass,
Yeah.
the vertical hourglass, and of course the horizontal hourglass is actually behind the other, and then of course all of the other elements. I see a black ribbon on the right hand side of the hourglass.
I'm not sure what that is. I have to ask him what that is, but it almost it reminds me, um I'm not sure because you've got the
Yeah.
two black lines coming out from to the left from there.
Yeah.
I don't know what that actual image is because it could be some type of tool or instrument, even like a battle kind of device. But I was thinking also maybe like a tobacco tie. A tobacco tie is something that you would put tobacco
Oh.
in the middle of
Hmm.
some cloth and then tied up with string and hand on because the tobacco is considered a tie that is considered a prayer, and so then after 4 days that would be burnt as so.
Well, thank you for sharing your impressions, your observations, and the description of the cover. I was taken by it, and I've always been fascinated when I have guests on, and the cover has some interesting symbolism in many instances, if it's not necessarily a photograph of the author or the main character in the book, that kind of thing, and it's fascinating. By the way, speaking, you mentioned James Joyce and Ulysses way back at the front end of the program. I have a copy of Ulysses in audible form on my phone. However, I have not had the wherewithal yet to listen to it, and I know that I'm going to take the time to do that. And to that end, is your book available yet in audible form, or is that something that you're looking at doing?
It's something I've spoken to some people about doing. I'm going to try to get as much attention as possible between now through the spring and do a bigger launch. Try to make it more of a national launch in June for Father's Day. It was
Mm.
officially published Father's Day this last year, um, in 2024, and it took a lot to get it published. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take after having written it. Um, So it's not available in that form yet. It is available in Kindle. So
Hmm.
the website you mentioned, boxerswritersmagazine.com, clicking onto that will you'll see on the top line it'll say books, but you could if you actually just put a slash books after boxerswritersmagazine.com, that brings you right to the books page on my website, and you've got two means of getting it online. Um, Amazon, which has Kindle, that's one of them. The other one is Lulu, Lulu, but both of them are there in all three versions because both Lulu and Amazon are in paperback form, and then Amazon also has Kindle, so you can
Hmm.
get it that way too.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll get this audio eventually. And if you get to St. Paul, Minnesota, you go to Irish on Grand, which is Irish gift shop. They have copies of it, and hopefully it'll get into stores also, but definitely online. You can definitely get it.
Absolutely. Well, you and I will talk about Audible. I produce them myself, so and I have a lot
Okay.
of fun doing it too. It's really exciting, and I love listening to them too. I was listening to one that was done a dramatization, and when it was over, I was sad it was over because I missed the characters.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing even when I'm reading when the book is being read and it's a specific author, and the book is over. It's like I miss that guy or I miss that gal. Shoot, and I go back and reread it if necessary to maintain that pseudo relationship, if you will, between myself and the narrator, as well as the author himself or herself. So it's a lot of fun. Mark Connor, my guest here on the program, we are talking about his book. It's About Time. Millions of copies sold for Dad. And I guess before we close out this particular segment, I want to ask you. Obviously, the art that we just talked about is emblematic thereof. The title. How did you come up with the title? Because I know a lot of people there's a Chinese proverb, may you always live in interesting times. I say the human race has lived in interesting times since the human race has been here. So it's always been interesting times, whether you're
Mhm.
being chased by a pterodactyl or or what have you. It's always interesting times. Where'd the title come from?
Um, so it came from that day. I just said this to myself that day. I was the 10 days from when my mom called me and said, I'm with your dad. I was just supposed to pick us up at the airport, but we're at the hospital because he had a heart attack, to the day that he died. Um, I had all this hope that he was going to live. And uh, as he died, I just looking at him thinking, I just need more time.
Yeah.
I need more time. And uh, I always wanted him to see me get married and have children, and I always wanted him to see me publish a book. And how much time do we have left right now,
We've got
actually?
plenty of time. Whatever you would like to share with us now, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Because this is so um the end of chapter one. I explain this. Um, I explain this. So, page. Uh, so he was, I was looking at him, watching him die, and saying to myself, he never saw me uh, publish a book. And he never saw me get married and have kids. And these are things I want him to see me do. And I want him to be in the lives of grandchildren I would give him. And I didn't get the chance to do that. And I said to myself, he'd had an argument with me uh, some years earlier about, you're a writer, you get these articles published and so forth, but you're always talking about getting a novel published. You're always talking about um, getting getting books published. How come you haven't gotten a book published yet? And we gotten into a big fight about it, and that was that's I just said to myself, it's about time. So um, I just so I've got this one poem called Life So Simple. Sunday, March 31, 2019 is when I wrote it. And I just had described this departure of a young lady that was a really good friend of mine and that I had some more interest in, but we had, it was a little kind of a really rough kind of conversation. I wrote this poem, and then right after that, I give this explanation of uh, this argument with my father and kind of the motivation for the book. And I think it really sums up, I mean, I think this really sums up what our whole conversation is here. So the poem goes like this. As if to pray, you start today in meditation on your bicycle wheel, the separate spokes united in the center. You want me to be blunt, you say. I want to be direct, but fear I'll frighten you away. The final action is the original intention. This statement is authentically true, not just my invention. My responsibility is to you, a comfort for my rest, a respect in my behavior, helping you to be your best. You can push me away, invite me to stay, or walk with me today, but we met for a reason, to teach each other and learn. Such a fact comes not from acts, but is a grace we did not earn. Demons distract, demons lie, and demons discourage us from our destiny till we die. Friends encourage, friends assist, and friends persist with love on which we rely. Your guardian angel already talked to mine. Together they have watched us share laughter and argue to the point of crying. You know they're sent by God who really does exist and is not a tyrant or a terrorist. Rather, he is love, family, life, held in common at the core. You and I, specific spokes, united in the center, spinning round from place to place and nothing more. There were some other poems I put together qualifying for appropriate inclusion in this book. I've always held myself, of course, to the highest of standards, never believing any of these poems ready for an attempt at publication. So I never tried, which is why I so embarrassingly titled the story, It's About Time. Dad challenged me once, as far back, I believe, as 2012, asking me why by the age of 40 I hadn't published at least one book. If I really was a writer, as I asserted myself to be, I should have been able to publish at least 5 novels or other books by then. I told him to lay off, that there were legitimate reasons for current incompletion, and that literary success was on its way, but that was all an excuse. The real reason was the lie in my heart that my work was going to be great. I just needed time to concentrate, which is always delayed right now for the job or the friend in trouble or another excuse, which justified not trying. The truth is, I was scared, so I never dared. If this book, which can fall flat on its face, is never presented to the public, I'll never know if you, the reader, recognize my talent. If it does, in fact, fall flat in its face, at least metaphorically, I fall flat on mine. However, so what? It's about time.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. You managed to get your book published a lot quicker than I. The impetus was in 2001, and I just published mine September of this year, of 2024. And I don't know about you, but when I'm doing my own Audible, recording it here in my studio, and as I'm reading through it, it's like new thoughts come to mind, new ideas to add to it. And I've shared that concept with others. Say, no, don't add to it. Don't update the manuscript on Amazon. Save it for the next edition.
Yeah.
Just relax and save it for the next. But things come up. I mean, you referenced your father. My father did not see my book published, although I think I may have sent a manuscript to my mother and father. I know I did to my sister many years ago. And my mother is still alive. She's 90 as of 2024. And it's, I mean, you must admit that it is a very interesting process because yours is, for all intents and purposes, it is a memoir,
Mhm.
you know, splashed with poetry. And have you always been interested in poetry and writing it, or has it just come naturally to you that it just kind of flowed?
You know, yeah, I think always been interested in it, but it's something that has come kind of naturally to me. And actually, it's something that I've written when I've just kind of, uh, I've written it and thought, I always thought, yeah, I'm writing this is cool. I'm writing this. It's cool to write this, but I want to write the prose. And I feel like I'm doing, I always felt like I'm doing something, um, because I'm not able to concentrate on the time to write the prose. Often I felt like that. And then a lot of the prose I've written is basically just been reporting or, I mean, just journalistic kind of stuff. Uh, and I've had the idea of and the notion and the desire to write fiction, write, novels and so forth. And I talk about a novel, a first novel I was writing in the book that got stolen, and, the only copy of it, it just, uh, disappeared from my car one time, but I won't go into that. That's a chapter 5, I think that is, and
Mm.
it kind of the story leads up to it, so I don't. It's one of those things talking about it in interviews. I can't give too much details about it because I got to get people. That's part of enticing you to read the story. Um,
Exactly. We don't want to give away the store. Don't give it away.
yeah, it would be
Well,
too much of a spoiler.
absolutely. Mark Connor's my guest, and he is the author of It's About Time. Millions of copies sold for Dad. And we're going to continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I want to thank you, Mark Connor, for joining us here on the program and sharing your life story, your family, your career, your sojourns to Ireland. I will live vicariously through you until my wife and I get back there in late fall or around Christmas time this year, 2025. I said the second time we went that I was only going to get two one-way tickets, that we weren't coming back. Well, of course, we obviously did. And I would love to do that this time, one-way tickets. And I've got people that I know there. Matter of fact, an interview coming up shortly of a woman who lives in Ireland, and I'm gonna hit her up for a space that we could occupy. Maybe her garage could be converted, and you know, anything to get us there. Someone even asked me, "Well, where in Ireland would you like to live?" And I said, "Look, as long as I'm on the island, it doesn't matter. I'll live in a cave, okay? Um, I'll put up a tent in a fairy circle, okay? I don't. If they'll let me live inside of the Newgrange prehistoric chamber, which they won't, I'll live there. But to be there, a lot of people think we're crazy when we go around Christmas time because it's cold and it's rainy and we love it. We were at one of the stone circles down around Skibbereen the first time we were there, and we were taking pictures, and all of the sudden the wind and the mist kicked up, and I have this, okay? And we're standing out there, and it feels like it's freezing, just cold. And of course, my head is scalp is exposed. And what we viewed that as, it was sort of a baptism by ice of sorts. But it was wonderful. I mean, it was just a great experience. So we're looking forward to going back. And I thank you for so much for joining us here on the program, and again sharing yourself and your story with us.
I greatly appreciate it, man. I'm really happy to be here. And actually, to promote this book, I've been doing a few of these podcasts. This is, no offense to all those others, but this has been the most enjoyable one so far. So I really appreciate it. You're a great host, man.
Well, thank you very much. I do have three final questions that I ask all of my guests,
Okay, but
and
only three.
only three. Only three. They're very simple, and you can keep them or you can expand in any way you want. And the first of those is, my friend, who is Mark Connor?
He's a literary pugilist.
Like that. I like that. What gets you up in the morning?
Um, I just thank God I got another day because life's too short.
Mm,
And I just I just love I no matter how well what gets me up every day is hope because and that's really what the book's about. It's about love, family, and life. It's meant to give people encouragement and it's meant to it's it's about St. Paul and celebrate St. Paul, celebrates fatherhood. It's about it gives a nod to Minneapolis, and it's also for America because I discussed this stuff that happened the year after my dad died, which is 2020, and I want us to stay together and and just be together as a country, and so it's meant to give encouragement and inspire hope in people, and so hope is actually no matter how hard things get. I always believe that there's going to be there's a possibility of something better. So
mm,
hope keeps me going.
absolutely. And the last question, what was your best day?
Wow, you mean just in life?
Whatever comes.
Man, well, just my best day. I don't know. I'm just grateful for life in general, and the best day just being just the the day that I'm with the people I love,
Ah,
whatever day that is.
whatever day. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Hey, Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.